Coming back, we are going to discuss the introduction to Orientalism by Edward W. Said. Now, before I discuss this, I must make a necessary correction. Now, so far as my memory goes, I have told you that the publication date of Orientalism is 1977, which is actually 1978. Okay, it was just a slip of the tongue. 1978, and that's why the Silver Jubilee edition came out in 2003. Now, this particular book is about representation. And we had finished our discussion yesterday, leaving out one sentence. And I had told you that I will start my discussion from that particular sentence today. So Ahmed Hassan, please do the honors.
Yes, sir.
Go on.
Okay, sir. So, should I begin from the first line or where we left?
The line from which I told you to begin today.
He was right about the place.
No, before that. I had told you to underline a particular sentence.
Yes, sir. The Orient was almost a European invention.
The Orient was almost a European invention. Why? I told you Orient and Occident, these are basically spatial markers. A spatial marker is basically a relative point on the face of the earth. Because when I call something to my east, even that may have something to its east. So when the European intellectuals, when the European populace thought of a place in Asia or Africa or in Australia or the Pacific, in a way, it was a kind of a categorization. Now, so far as our context is concerned, the East meant large parts in the Middle East, in the Far East, in India, in places like Egypt, and so on and so forth. So it's a large part. Now, even a layman like myself can very easily understand that these places had their marked distinctions, differences from one another. They were culturally different, they are geographically different, they were historically different, they were topographically different. They had different civilizations, different kind of population, different customs, and so on and so forth. So to club them all together as constituents of the Orient, it was basically some kind of an intellectual violence, a European conceit where through heterogeneous places were yoked by violence together, despite their many counts of difference. And why was this invention necessary for Europe? It was necessary for Europe in order to otherize the Orient, in order to justify their attitude to and treatment of the Orient and the Orientals. Have you understood?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Go on, Ahmed.
The Orient was almost a European invention and had been since antiquity a place of romance, exotic beings, haunting memories and landscape, remarkable experiences. Now,
Wait a minute.
it
Wait a minute. From the very antiquity, from very, very ancient times, Orient was categorized as an exotic place, full of wealth, full of mystery, full of danger, full of boundless opportunities. Hello? 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 Um, so just think about it, read it again. And Ahmed, this is a very, very important part of the text. So go slow. Okay? Don't jump from one sentence to another. If I need to discuss them, I will discuss them. Okay, read this again. From the very antiquity, Orient was, go on.
Orient was almost a European invention and had been since antiquity a place of romance, exotic beings.
Wait. A place of romance. Now you have to understand what is a place of romance. Romance does not only mean falling in love. My dear friends, please try to understand. Romance means a free play of imagination, of adventure, of strangeness added to beauty. So it was a place of romance because it was a place of beauty, it was a place of passion, and so on and so forth. Yes, go on. Of exotic beings. Exotic beings. Why and how? Now you tell me. Please try to understand this. When you go to Rajasthan, and you see the camel over there. You find it different, you find it exotic, you find, if you are given an ice cream made of camel's milk, it will taste different, yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes or no? So you go to Europe, you look at the flora and fauna over there, and you find them a place of exotic beings, exotic flowers, exotic trees, and so on and so forth, animals, birds. You find there curlews and plovers and all that, chaffinches and all that, which you do not see over here very, very frequently. So you can very easily understand that for the European perceivers, because Europe was perceiving, Europe was categorizing, Europe was historically more powerful, a conquering race, a settling race. And that's why Europe considered the Orient as a place of romance, of exotic beings, and go on.
Haunting memories and landscapes, remarkable experiences.
Wait. Haunting memories and landscapes. Why? Because Europe is, at least most of it, either cold or temperate, based on its geographical situation, Okay, location. Now, here you see the Orient meant a vast deal of variety in terms of places, customs, weathers, food, that is cuisine and all that. Okay. So haunting memories of, say, hunting the tigers and elephants and crocodiles and all that. You just read To His Coy Mistress by Andrew Marvell and you will understand what I mean. Okay. And then landscape. The Oriental landscape is also vast and varied. There are so many things. There are mountains, rivers, deserts, forests, and so on and so forth. So obviously, tropical vegetation and all that meant that the landscapes were also different, varied. If and when you read a poem like Brazil, January 1, 1502, by Elizabeth Bishop, you will see what kind of vastness and variety could be experienced in the newly colonized lands like Brazil. Okay, and haunting memories and landscape and remarkable experiences. So all experiences were remarkable. They were extraordinary. Remarkable means that can bear remarks, that can occasion remarks, force you to notice and exclaim. Okay? Okay, go on.
Now it was disappearing. In a sense, it had happened, its time was over. Perhaps it seemed irrelevant that Orientals themselves had something at stake in the process. That even
Yes.
in the
Yes. Let's stop here and discuss. Now, according to that journalist who was visiting Beirut in the 1970s, in the mid 1970s, during the Civil War, he thought that this place of romance, of remarkable experience, that was vanishing because war was taking away the charm of the place. But Said points out very, very forcefully that in such a categorization or description or representation of the Orient, an Oriental place like Beirut, for example, what the European journalist is managing to forget very conveniently is the fact that the Orient was also peopled by the so-called Orientals. To call Beirut a place of Chateaubriand or Norval is a gross understatement because it was not the place of Chateaubriand or Norval. Even though their names have not been kept etched on the tablet of history. Thousands, millions, and billions of men who have lived in such places, who are natives, or who had gone there before the European colonization began. They were also the stakeholders. So Beirut was not only a place of Chateaubriand and Nerval, it was also the place of others who came earlier, who lived longer, and identified with the place of Beirut. Go on.
That even in the time of Chateaubriand and Naval Orientals had lived there, and that now it was they who were suffering.
Yes, and now it was they who were suffering. So the underlying message of Said's remark, it seems, is that rather than the superficial beauty and pristine charm of Beirut, the journalist should have concentrated on the sorry plight of the inhabitants of Beirut. Because Chateaubriand and Nerval, they were dead and buried. They were gone. Okay, go on.
The main thing for the European visitor was a European representation of the Orient and its contemporary fate, both of which had a privileged communal significance
Yes.
for the
So
journalist
for
and
the
his
European,
French readers.
for the European visitor, this representation is always partial, because they are actually looking at the Orient from their perspective. Are you getting my point?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go on.
Americans will not feel quite the same about the Orient, which for them is much more likely to be associated very differently with the Far East, like China and Japan mainly.
And China and Japan?
Mainly. Just
Mainly. So for Americans, this is a different game altogether. Because American interests were concentrated on other places. Because America had joined the bandwagon in the 20th century itself. So obviously, America might have been concerned with and interested in the Far East, like countries like Japan and China. They were not interested so much about Egypt or India in that sense, because these places were basically held and garrisoned and ruled and plundered chiefly by the Westerners. Okay? Go on.
unlike the Americans, the French and the British, less so the Germans, Russians, Spanish, Portuguese, Italians, and Swiss, have had a long tradition of what I shall be calling orientation, a way
Huh?
of, sorry, sir, orientation, sir,
Spelling?
calling orientation,
Spelling?
ORICN,
ORIEN.
CN আছে স্যার এখানে।
ওটা ইএন হবে, হ্যাঁ, ORIEN.
ওরিয়েন্টালিজম আছে আমাদের বইটাতে।
ওরিয়েন্টালিজম হবে।
ও Sorry. I shall.
Yes. They have been associated with the Orient historically, especially England and France, and to a lesser extent, other places like Germany, Spain, Portugal, Sweden, and all that, and Denmark, and all that, the Netherlands, even. Because they have, from time to time, ruled various places in the Orient. Okay. So, Said is going to point out some kind of a historical fact, because these European powers had been more concerned with and associated with the Orient. Their feeling about the Orient is different from the feeling of the Americans. Okay, go on. We will at least finish today this particular paragraph.
Okay, sir. I shall be calling Orientalism a way of coming to terms with the Orient that is based on the Orient's special place in European Western experience.
Underline. So how is Said defining Orientalism? Read it again. I will be calling Orientalism a coming to terms with the Orient, responding to the Orient. Orientalism is the European response to the Orient. The way Europe has categorized the Orient, the way Europe has represented the Orient, the way Europe has researched the Orient, leveled the Orient, ethnocartography, for example, and so on and so forth. Go on.
The Orient is not only adjacent to Europe, it is also the place of Europe's greatest and richest and oldest colonies, the source of its civilizations and languages, its cultural contestant, and one of its deepest and most recurring images of the other.
Yes. Why? Because you think about it. When you talk about languages, there are Indo-European family of languages. When you talk about arithmetic, algebra, these were all taught the Europeans by the Orient. For example, you know, the zero, cipher, it went to Europe from India through the Arab countries. Yes or no? We all know about that. But at the same time, Europe considered the Orient as a kind of an inferior being, cultural contestant, and most recurrently, their other. Okay, go on.
In addition, the Orient has helped to define Europe or the West as its contrasting image, idea, personality, experience.
Yes, so obviously, you know, without comparison, without relativism, there is no absolute representation possible. Because if I call you tall, it is to be a relative statement. If you are taller than the average height, you will be tall. Now, someone who is tall in Europe, in Africa, he can be average size in his country, but taller for us. Okay, just hold it. Are you getting my point? See, if you actually check করে দিয়েছো? আচ্ছা আচ্ছা ঠিক আছে। You see, when you call somebody fair, forsha, again that is a relative statement. Are you getting my point? So in a way, Europe, not only did Europe categorize the Orient as its other, but based on that otherness, Europe could define its own selfhood. This is how representation works. Are you getting my point? দেখো যদি বুঝতে না পারো বলো. If you don't understand this, just let me know and I will try to make you understand differently. Have you understood?
Yes, sir. Got it.
Because you see, when I look at you and categorize you in a particular way, when I differentiate you from me, I am actually, what am I doing? I am actually thinking about certain characteristics, certain features, certain traits that make you different. You may be tall, I may be short. You may be fair, I may be dark. You may be a male, I may be a female. You may have curly hair, I may have straight hair. You may have blonde features. I may be brunette or negroid or mongoloid. So obviously, any categorization, any representation is always oppositional. It is always different and relative. Are you getting my point?
Yes, sir.
Have you understood? Okay. Ahmed,
Yes, sir.
what about this paragraph?
Sir,
Let's. How
there are
many
more,
lines are left?
8 lines, sir.
Okay, go on. I will finish today's these 8 lines.
Yet, none of this Orient is merely imaginative. The Orient is an integral of European material civilization and culture. Orientalism expresses and represents that part culturally and even ideologically as a mode of discourse with supporting institutions, vocabulary, scholarship, imagery, doctrines, even colonial bureaucracies and colonial styles.
Underline. Orientalism actually represents the Orient in a particular way. How does it do it? by creating particular institutions devoted to Oriental studies, by creating different styles, different vocabulary, different customs, thereby not only establishing but also maintaining, perpetuating this difference. Are you getting my point? So European imagination always associates certain features with the Orient. Even though Orient is a vast, heterodox, it cannot be categorized as one. Because an Egyptian, an Indian, an Arab, these are not similar people. They are different. But they are all called Orientals. Are you getting my point?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go on.
In contrast, the American understanding of the
Just
Orient.
finish it. Finish it. Finish this paragraph.
Okay, sir.
Yes, in contrast,
The American understanding of the Orient will seem considerably less dense, although recent Japanese, Korean, and Indo-Chinese adventures ought not now to be creating a more sober, more realistic Oriental awareness. Moreover, the vastly expanded American political and economic role in the Near East, actually the Middle East, makes great claims on our understanding of the Orient.
finished.
Yes, sir.
Now he is clarifying why he has told us that the American interest in the Orient is different. Because now America has not been concerned with the Orient for such a long time as had the Europeans. But then he qualifies his statement by talking about the American interest in and exposure to the Near East and the Far East and the Middle East. You know, think about American experience of dropping the atom bomb on Japan and governing much of it in some way or another. Its experiences in the Korean War, its experiences in Indochina, you know, Vietnam. That has created, because this was written in 1970s, the Vietnam War, the Korean War, the Japanese adventure, all these things were recent memory, parts of recent memory. And that's why, and also we all know that after the Second World War, because the United States became a world power. So American dominance, control, economic say or role in various parts of the world became more visible than before. That is what he is trying to point out. Just think about it. When you are talking about the Orient, it is being viewed, it is being controlled, it is being categorized, it is being represented. All these things are being done to it from outside, from the Occident, from the West. And that is what Said is trying to point out. And because even Karl Marx has said that the Orientals could not represent themselves, they had to be represented. So obviously the responsibility and the prerogatives, the privileges of representation are all on the side of the West. And because the East was a carrier an opportunity, a place of work, of engagement. So obviously, again, the representation had its own oppositional politics. That is what I have been trying to make sense of. With this, we come to the end of today's discussion from my end. If you have any query, you can ask them. Are there any queries? If there are not, in that case, Bikram Chaudhary will remove me from the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Have a good day.